when a friend announces a new baby, what's the absolute, almost instantaneous question we all ask?
Oh, yeah. Straight away.
Is it a boy or a girl?
It's the immediate foundation, isn't it? That single question forces us to categorize a person, like, before we even know their name.
Yeah.
Gender is just so central to every assumption we make, how we interact, even how we structure our own identities and, life expectations.
And that's exactly why we're diving into this source material today. We're taking a look at the anthropological mission, really, to understand why gender is so primary.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe more importantly, how incredibly diverse human systems of gender and sexuality actually are across cultures, past and present.
Right. We're trying to move beyond that simple idea that gender is just biological destiny, that it's all nature.
Yeah, fixed.
Exactly. To see the profound ways culture shapes, well, everything.
So first things first.
Our first task definitely has to be setting the foundation. We need to separate three terms that often get tangled up. We have to clearly distinguish between biological sex, cultural gender, and erotic sexuality. If we don't separate them, the whole discussion just kind of collapses back into essentialism.
Okay, let's separate these concepts right now then. When we talk about sex, what are we talking about?
So sex is the biological and anatomical hardware, basically.
Right, the physical stuff.
Yeah, determined by a list of physical features. Visible genitalia, internal organs, hormones, chromosomes, XX, XY, but also other possibilities.
And crucially, even this part, the biological part, isn't straightforward.
Not at all. What's really crucial for you, the listener, to understand is that even this seemingly scientific, neat biological division is complex.
How so?
That long list of factors, chromosomes and hormones and anatomy, it actually results in a great deal of ambiguity and diversity within those traditional categories.
No, okay.
Just hormones alone can produce features that don't neatly match the standard chromosomal map XX or XY. It means biological sex is far less binary than we tend to assume.
Right. And that biological variation is precisely why social scientists came up with the term gender separate from sex.
Exactly. Gender refers to the cultural roles and expectations that get built upon those biological categories, however ambiguous they might be.
So gender is learned.
Totally. Gender is the assignment of specific learned behaviors, responsibilities, rights. You learn gender through enculturation, starting from childhood. You don't inherit it genetically.
But lots of people resist that distinction, don't they? They feel like gender is innate.
They do. And when people resist, they're often subscribing to what we call essentialism.
Okay.
This is that powerful cultural idea that a trait, like gender, is so profoundly deep, so inborn, that it creates a common, unchangeable identity for everyone who shares it.
Like the old saying.
Exactly. It drives that circular logic, like boys will be boys, as if it's inevitable, fixed.
Okay, so sex is biology, complex biology. Gender is cultural, learned. What about the third term, sexuality?
So sexuality refers to erotic desires, thoughts, practices, and the sociocultural identities associated with those things.
Like heterosexual, gay, lesbian.
Well, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, the whole spectrum.
And historically, particularly in the West, there's been this dominant idea.
Heteronormativity, yes. That ingrained institutional idea that heterosexuality wasn't just one option, but the single most natural or sort of default form of human sexuality.
Which has been challenged.
Massively challenged, of course, by the global LGBTQIA+ movement. And that movement also pioneered the reappropriation of the term queer,
Right.
which is now often used to signal a more fluid, situational approach to identity and desire. It pushes back against the notion of fixed, lifelong sexual or gender identities.
Okay, so we've got our terms. Sex, gender, sexuality. We know essentialism is a thing. But let's ask the critical question. Does biology itself, does the natural world demand these rigid binaries we often impose?
That's the perfect question. Let's look at our closest non-human relatives, the primates.
What did early research suggest?
Well, historically, back in the 1950s, the view was extremely male-centric. Researchers tended to see males as the dominant, competitive public actors.
And females.
Females were often portrayed as passive, marginal figures, just focused on babies.
But that changed.
Oh, completely. Later, much more rigorous studies, the studies that actually, watched what females did all day, showed a totally different picture.
Okay.
They discovered most primate groups are actually structured around related females. They are the central, critical social actors.
Interesting.
And females are often highly competitive themselves and sexually assertive. It turned out that for males, often the better reproductive strategy wasn't constant fighting, but actually friendliness and cooperation with females.
So the takeaway for us listening.
The takeaway is clear. Both sexes in primates are competitive, cooperative, and central actors. There's no simple template for human gender behavior found there. Biology isn't giving us a simple script.
What about physical size? Sexual dimorphism.
Mm-hmm.
You look at a male gorilla, nearly twice the size of a female. That must mean something, right?
It does suggest something about their social structure, absolutely. But humans, we exhibit a much lower level of dimorphism. Human females are about 90% the size of males, on average. Closer to gibbons, actually, who are relatively peaceful and more egalitarian than to the highly dimorphic and aggressive gorillas.
And there was a caution from an anthropologist.
Yes, Adrienne Zillman. She issued a really powerful caution that we should absolutely remember. There is no simple correlation between anatomy and behavioral expression within or between species.
So our biology is flexible. It doesn't lock us in.
Precisely. And to really drive that point home, look at humanity's two closest DNA relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees.
Both share 99% of our DNA.
Exactly, 99%. Yet their social structures are profoundly different.
Chimpanzees, we know, are famously male-dominant, intensely hierarchical, lots of male aggression, the whole alpha male thing.
Right, that's the classic image. But then you have the bonobos.
They make love, not war primates.
That's them. They are largely female-dominant, mostly egalitarian, peaceful, and they use remarkably frequent and varied sexual behavior across ages, sexes, to build social bonds and relieve tension.
Wait a minute. So if we share 99% of our DNA with both of these species, but one is peaceful and female-led, and the other is aggressive and male-led, then the idea of a single natural human gender template just evaporates.
Completely. It makes it pretty much impossible to argue that our biology dictates one specific set of gender roles for humans. The potential is much wider.
Does this variability extend to human abilities like cognition? Are men and women's brains fundamentally different?
The brain question. Biologist Anne Fausto Sterling did a massive review of studies on human cognitive differences. Hundreds of studies.
And the finding?
The overwhelming finding. The vast majority of studies show no statistically significant difference in cognitive abilities between boys and girls.
Wow, that really flies in the face of common stereotypes.
It does. And even where tiny differences are occasionally found, maybe in some measures of spatial ability, for instance.
Gender itself could only account for about 5% of the overall variation. 95% was down to other factors.
Like what?
Like individual practice, educational opportunities, cultural exposure, simple encouragement.
So culture shapes ability.
You can see it directly. Compare societies.
Right.
Inuit girls in the Arctic, traditionally given lots of freedom to roam and explore, show no difference in spatial abilities compared to Inuit boys.
Okay.
But Temne girls in West Africa, whose activities were historically much more restricted, sometimes underperformed on those same tests compared to Temne boys. Culture shapes capability far more than biology, it seems.
Okay, so if biology doesn't dictate capability and cognition isn't inherently locked to sex, then we really need to shift our thinking about gender itself.
Exactly. This leads scholars to argue that gender is fundamentally a performance.
A performance.
Yeah. It's not an inborn essence we just have. It's a set of cultural identities that people must constantly perform and have naturalized made to see natural through daily actions, interactions, everything.
Who talked about this? The philosopher Judith Butler famously summed this up. She said gender is an impersonation of an ideal that, truthfully, nobody actually inhabits.
So we're all kind of acting, trying to live up to an impossible standard.
In a way, yes. We're all constantly striving, performing to meet these perfect gender norms that are ultimately unattainable for anyone.
And that pressure to perform can be intense. The source material had an example.
Yeah, a striking one from Turkey. Government programs providing assisted reproductive technologies like IVF to disabled military veterans.
Okay. Why?
The explicit point of the program was to help these men father children so they could feel like real men again. It was about reinforcing normative masculinity, a performance literally supported by the state.
Wow. That really shows how tied identity and performance are.
And this rigid focus on the binary performance, man or woman, performing correctly, often just fails when faced with biological reality, specifically the reality of intersex people.
These are people born with variations in sex characteristics.
Exactly. Variations in chromosomes, hormones, or anatomy that don't fit the typical definitions of male or female.
How common is that variation? You hear about it, but is it rare?
The number might surprise you. Fausta Sterling concluded it occurs in about 1.7% of births.
1.7%. That's not insignificant.
No, it's roughly the same frequency as people born with red hair. It's a natural part of human biological diversity.
So what kind of variations are we talking about?
It can include different chromosome combinations like XO or XXY, or variations in how the body responds to hormones or anatomical differences.
And historically, the medical approach was?
Historically, the medical tendency was immediate intervention to fix the ambiguity.
Meaning surgery.
Hormones.
Yes, often immediate surgery and hormonal treatments to assign a sex, male or female. And often the goal was specifically to create a body capable of heterosexual intercourse later in life.
But Fausta Sterling argued against that, passionately. She argues that since identity emerges through a complex interplay of biology and culture and personal experience, these irreversible medical interventions should be delayed.
Until when?
Until the person is old enough to understand and give informed consent. Identity cannot and should not just be assigned by a doctor based on surgical possibilities.
Right. Which leads us naturally to societies that did have ways to accommodate this kind of complexity, right?
Yeah.
Systems with more than two genders.
Precisely. Multiple gender systems exist, challenging the idea that two genders is the only or natural option.
And the classic example here is?
The Native North American Two-Spirit people. This is a modern pan-Indian term used to describe people understood to possess both male and female spirits.
What were they called historically?
Early European explorers used the term birdache, often pejoratively, but the concept existed in many, many different indigenous cultures under different local names.
And how are they viewed within their own cultures?
Crucially, two-spirit individuals were often highly esteemed and highly valued. They weren't seen as less than. They often held important roles as healers, spiritual leaders, mediators.
Seen as unique and powerful.
Exactly, not deficient. And they were often highly successful at performing the work typically associated with the opposite gender role in their society.
So male-identified two-spirits might excel at?
Renowned for things like needlework, cooking, domestic skills, while female-identified two-spirits were often celebrated as skilled hunters, warriors, leaders.
But this tradition faced suppression.
Tragically, yes, through colonization and forced assimilation. European and later American and Canadian policies, especially through residential and boarding schools, which operated roughly from the 1860s right up to the late 1970s, actively sought to eradicate these traditions.
Oh.
By branding these diverse gender identities as sinful, deviant, backwards, trying to force everyone into a rigid male-female binary.
Okay, so we've covered biology's flexibility, the cultural performance of gender, the existence of non-binary realities. Now we need to talk about power.
Yes. Gender isn't just about identity or roles, it's deeply intertwined with power structures.
Through what mechanism?
Through gender ideology. This refers to the coordinated set of ideas, beliefs, and norms about gender that get embedded in our institutions, family, law, religion, education, the economy.
And the most pervasive of these ideologies globally
Is patriarchy, which positions men, or the idea of masculinity, as holding authority and dominance in both private life, like the family, and public life, like politics and work.
And you can see this ideology pop up in surprising places.
Oh, absolutely. The source gives a great example. Think about modern weddings. You might have a highly educated, independent professional woman
Yeah.
who still chooses to participate in the tradition of being given away by her father.
Right, passing from one man's authority to another's.
Exactly. That moment enacts an old-fashioned patriarchal ideology. Even if consciously the people involved don't think of it that way, it operates deep down.
So if patriarchy is male rule, what about the opposite, matriarchy? Rule by women. Does that exist?
This gets tricky. We often hear about matrilineal societies.
Where descent and inheritance pass through the mother's line.
Correct. Kinship is traced through female links. But crucially, even in the strongest matrilineal societies anthropologists have studied, the actual day-to-day power and leadership roles, they're still typically held by men.
Not the mother, but maybe her brother.
Usually the mother's brother, yes. He holds the authority over his sister's children. So it's important to be clear. True matriarchy as a a dominant, institutionalized system where senior women hold primary political and social power.
Yeah.
It's essentially a hypothetical gender ideology. It doesn't appear to exist as a widespread functioning system anywhere in the contemporary world.
Okay, so patriarchy is widespread, matriarchy hypothetical. Now, it's tempting to assume men just automatically benefit from patriarchy, right? They get privilege just for being men.
It is tempting, and there are certainly privileges, but that assumption completely overlooks the cost and the work involved in maintaining that dominant masculine position.
How so?
This is where we need to look closely at specific cultural definitions of masculinity. Cultural anthropologist Daniel Jordan Smith did fascinating work with Igbo men in Nigeria. His book title says it all. To be a man is not a one-day job.
Intriguing title. What did he find?
He shows that for Igbo men, masculinity isn't something you're just given at birth because you're male. It's a lifelong, intensive struggle.
The struggle.
Yes, it requires constant work, constant performance, and importantly, substantial financial resources to achieve and maintain that status of being a real man.
So, even for the dominant gender, it's a burden. What kind of things did they have to do?
Things like paying substantial bride wealth to get married, providing financially for a large number of dependents, sponsoring really lavish, expensive funerals to show status. It's demanding.
Wow. So this study really flips the script on simple ideas of male privilege.
Absolutely. It shows how cultural mandates, these gender ideologies, can be profoundly limiting and demanding, even for those theoretically at the top of the hierarchy. Being a man isn't easy. It's a project.
Okay, let's try to synthesize. We've established that human biology is fundamentally flexible, not rigidly binary, and our notions of gender and sexuality are incredibly diverse across cultures. They're largely culturally performed, not just naturally given.
Right, that rigid two-gender binary system, it's clearly not natural in a biological sense, nor is it universal across human societies.
And this growing awareness, this cultural understanding, seems to be driving social changes today.
You definitely see it. For instance, the push towards using more gender-neutral language, specifically the increasing use of "them" as singular pronouns.
To include people who identify outside or beyond the male-female binary.
Exactly. It's an attempt to make language reflect a more complex reality.
But here's a critical question then. Will changing pronouns, changing language, be enough on its own to really dismantle deep-seated patriarchal structures?
Ah, that's the fascinating challenge, isn't it? If language changes, does the underlying power structure automatically follow? It's not so clear.
Is there an example of that?
Well, consider the Akan people in Ghana. Anthropologically, it's considered a society with significant patriarchal elements in its structure.
Okay.
Yet their language, Twi, is already gender-free. It has no gendered pronouns like he or she.
Yeah.
Everyone is referred to with gender-neutral terms.
So gender-neutral language doesn't automatically equal gender equality in practice?
Apparently not in that case. For the Akan, gender is still a fundamental aspect of cultural identity, social organization, and expected behavior throughout life, despite the gender-neutral language. Language alone didn't erase the gendered structure.
So that leaves us with a really provocative thought for you, our listeners. We know gender and sexuality are culturally constructed. That means, by definition, they can change. We've seen the evidence for biological flexibility, for cultural diversity.
So the question becomes,
How might we apply these insights? How could we consciously use our understanding of biology's flexibility and culture's power to perhaps imagine and maybe even build a social system where the inequality that so often operates through gender is finally truly eliminated?
that's definitely something worth thinking about long after this conversation ends.